Hello everybody and welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I'm your host, Ads Lyson. On the podcast today I have United States Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant Beau Hancock. Beau is currently serving a 3-year deployment here in the United Kingdom, helping teach a Royal Marines Close Combat syllabus to recruits at the Commando Training Centre. RMCC, as it is known, teaches everything from basic striking and arrest drills to room entries and non-combative takedowns. In the podcast, Beau talks about his childhood and what those early years as a private in the USMC were like leading up to 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq. Enjoy and kick back to a grumpy surfer conversation with my good friend, Gunny Beau Hancock. Gunnery Sergeant Beau Hancock, welcome to the Grumpy Surfer podcast.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit strange, isn't it, this?
Yeah, it's a bit surreal. We've come some ways since we, first met each other, so.
Yeah, well, we've known each other, 3 years now?
Yeah, man, just over, yeah.
Yeah, so, unfortunately.
Unfortunately for you, probably.
Yeah. How was the course this morning? The Royal Marines Close Combat Instructor Trainer course. Try saying that 3 times.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, isn't it? Well, they've grafted hard. It's 3 weeks hard labor, but final, evolution not to take anything away from it, or anybody that might be thinking about doing it. It's hard work. They're up for arguably close to 24 hours, getting tested on their techniques, their retention, and absolutely ending themselves. So they had a great time. Yeah,
it was the hardest thing I did physically anyway. I was about, how old was I? 37 when I did it, so.
That was strong effort, man. Strong effort.
I was at the clip.
Yeah, I'm sure you were real happy with me at the time.
Yeah, well, we did shout at you a little bit because you've been a bit of a dick, but hey, there you go.
That's me in a nutshell. I guess the podcast's over now.
Should just go now. Right, Gunny, so what I want to do is go right back to the start. So, can you talk a little bit about your childhood in America, where you grew up, how you came to join the Marine Corps?
Yeah, man, I'll try not to put anybody to sleep, but I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So anybody that unfamiliar with the states, sits just up on top of Texas is usually the best way to explain it to people. It's the panhandle, it's the upside down frying pan. It's like northeast Oklahoma. I think of it as a great place to be from. Not really a good place to be. It's not a lot going on in Tulsa, Oklahoma anymore. I haven't visited in a while, so I'm sure I'll get a lot of crap from people back home now talking about it. But I was born there, grew up there, moved around a little bit, down to Texas with my grandparents. They raised me for a little bit. I spent some time with my mom, and she had her own kind of adversities through life, and grandparents ended up looking after me for a while, and I kind of grew up in that military family. I had my own troubles as a kid. Ended up having a few run-ins with the law. Didn't end up finishing school really. Ended up joining the military. Yeah, but I think everyone has their own rough childhood in their own ways, and I had my adversities. But it wasn't anything unduly hard, I would say. Decent middle class life, really.
Yeah. Was there anything that really swayed you towards joining the military, or was it just a family background?
Yeah, I think with the family background, and you grow up, you watch movies, and I think my old man, who's my grandfather, but I refer to him as that. I never knew my father, so sob story there. But kind of growing up in that, you look up to someone, and they kind of set that example. And I reckon I probably since the age of 10 always knew I was going to go in one form or another. I never swum good enough to be a Navy SEAL, and they don't have infantry, so that kind of narrowed it down to the Marine Corps for me. So that's kind of where I was going, and then me getting in trouble in school just expedited the process. So I probably joined a little bit sooner than what I would have, but I think I was always going in that direction.
What made you join the Marine Corps as opposed to like the Army or the Navy or something like that?
I don't want to say anything as shat as the uniforms. I think it comes down to the salesman. So the recruiters turned up, and I was a Navy family, so the Marines and the Navy were always forefront in the services as far as how it was delivered to me, because that was my exposure. There's nothing wrong with the Army, nothing wrong with the Coast Guard, the Air Force. They're all great branches, but I think my exposure was pretty much limited or focused on the Navy and the Marine Corps just based on my family. And then the recruiter, he turned up and he had the best sales pitch, really. He was direct, told me what I wanted. I told him where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my life, and it just kind of hit off. And 2 weeks later, I was gone on the plane. So, like our Army and everything does great things, and now they're pretty much getting all our tanks as well, because Marine Corps has done away with tanks now. So I love the Army, but my focus was kind of always there with the Marines.
Okay, so you went to the careers office, you joined up. So where did you go through basic then?
Yeah, so only two places you can go, West Coast and East Coast, and I'm what they refer to as a Hollywood Marine. So I went to San Diego, MCRD San Diego. And
good weather?
Yeah. The only thing is where it's situated is it's a stone's throw from San Diego International Airport. So you spend half your recruit training just looking up at planes, wishing you were on one of them. So it's one of those where it's a mixed blessing. But the weather is absolutely amazing, but it's not like you get to enjoy it.
Yeah, on the flip side of it, you also got to deal with all the heat and stuff, haven't you? So.
Well, yeah, and it's different being over here, obviously in the UK, like different temperatures. But Oklahoma gets quite hot in the summer. You get all seasons in Oklahoma. You get the rain, you get the snow, you get loads of tornadoes. But you get a lot of heat in the summer, so you get quite used to it, I think, in America, because we're sitting quite lower than you. Because I think where we're at now kind of like shoots over to like Maine and lower Alaska,
yeah,
as far as latitude goes. So when we're comparing weather, I always got to keep that in mind. I was like, man, why is this rainy and cold all the time? It's like, oh yeah, because I'm sitting in Maine essentially. So I love the heat. I always had it, and I think operationally, and as I've grown through the Marine Corps, like I've always been in a hot place, and obviously yourself as well, but my duty stations as well, and we'll talk about those, I'm sure. But I love the heat. It's if you want to see me in a bad place, I mean, let it start snowing.
Oh, tell me about the majority of the exchanges that we have come over here. They suffer a bit in the winter.
Yeah, it's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not. I'm going to sit here and whinge about it. But when having the dogs and then just getting them out, and it's just muddy. You get used to it after a while. But I think I'm just probably one of those guys that has that seasonal depression thing going on. Like I'm mega affected by the weather, so I can get real grumpy, I guess, when it gets cold and rainy, and it's my fault.
So you rock up day one, week one.
Oh, we're going to talk about that already.
Yeah, let's do. I mean, we've all seen the stereotypes of Full Metal Jacket. All those stereotypical films. Where you're getting shouted out, all lined up and stuff.
Yeah, so it's a weird one for me. And like I said, I didn't have a traditional school upbringing. So I find myself in high school. I'd made some mistakes, kind of where I was at. I had some issues going on as a kid, and you've got the full like ADHD bit, so I'm struggling to deal with that. My grandparents, who are, they've already raised a set of kids, and God bless them, they took me on for most of it, and I was a nightmare. I mean, imagine being, 60, probably going on 70, having to raise just an absolute tornado. So, I mean, they're just absolute saints. So I started running into my own problems, and I was struggling when I got into high school as far as discipline and focusing on schoolwork, because school had been quite easy up to that point. I never had to try. So then when I'm actually trying to learn something, I was having some difficulties, and I was struggling with how to deal with that. And I ended up getting a bit of trouble, wrong crowd, and I was actually, those little ROTC cadet programs.
Yeah.
So I was in one of those. I sat there in my uniform on I think it was a Tuesday, if I remember right. Sat there in my full ROTC uniform, and in comes, you might see it in the news, but we've got like cops that work in the school, call them like service officers.
Yeah, we've got something similar for like the not disobedient kids, the naughty kids that can be quite violent, and they sit in the back and they don't manhandle them.
Oh yeah.
When they're naughty, but yeah.
Oh, there's me then. Once again, in a nutshell. So I'm sat there in this little cadet's uniform essentially, and watched the service officer for the school and asked me to stand up, and hands go behind my back, and fully arrested in front of all my classmates. I mean, it's public record, so it's not like I'm hiding anything. And there was my first introduction to the legal system in front of the whole school and all that. So obviously, no more high school for me. I had to go from there to what they call an alternative school for those naughty kids. So I think Pershing Alternative School in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I ended up over there for a few months, and I decided, I wasn't quite done with my personal adversities in my acting out. So once again, introduced to the legal system, and I had some struggles there. And it wasn't a choice the judge gave me, but the judge strongly suggested that I look into a youth alternative program they have out there, which is another alternative high school, essentially a military school. It's called Thunderbird Youth Academy in Pryor, Oklahoma. So shout out to them, I guess. And you end up, it's live aboard, no weekends off or anything. So you essentially go down there. You get the discipline instilled in you, essentially military school. You get like drill instructors, drill sergeants down there because it's run by, if it still is, the National Guard, which is kind of like a reservist type organization we have. And they run you through. You get school, so you get pucker schooling. You get to take your GED because obviously most guys there didn't finish their high school, so they need a diploma, as you were, to kind of get them into the next stage. And they even offer college, so I was able to take 2 college classes while I was there. Ended up graduating quite well, and that's when the recruiter approached me. So they allow their recruiters on because obviously most of these people are troubled, myself as well, and next stage of this discipline, so they don't go back out and back to the same crowds they were running with, are to give you a military opportunity to fully turn your life around, educational opportunities, all that. So that's when the recruiter found me and sold me. He didn't really have to sell me. I think I kind of realized that if I went back, that I'd probably be in a much worse place than I already was.
Yeah.
So I kind of took a little bit of ownership there and realized that I should probably leave. So 9 days after I graduated, that which was December 1999, 9 days later, it was just the day after Christmas. So good Christmas present to myself. Get on a plane, yeah?
Beautiful.
Treat yourself.
Yeah, get yourself down there.
So on a plane to San Diego with a few other individuals, same as me. Some had just made the choice. Some were probably in worse places, some probably in better places, and that's life. And I found myself in San Diego. So when you hear, party like it's 1999, I was stood there on Century in San Diego.
Mate, you don't need that, do you?
Yeah. So no, it was good though. But some of the stories you see in the movies, some of it's true, some of it's, obviously those movies were made. Full Metal Jacket, you're talking about 60s back then. Some of that same tradition is still in place. They definitely need to break you down, take away that that bit of self, and give you an understanding of the importance of the mission and other people's before yourself. So service before self, I guess. So you're there with, I think we started with just shy of 100 people, stood tall, next to naked there on line, waiting for the instructions to get dressed and to go on with your first detail. And so it's one of those, that was the culture shock. That was something I hadn't gotten in military school. So, I mean, a lot of it was kind of, part and parcel. I was used to the yelling, the screaming, a bit of the discipline, but it certainly went to the next level when I went to boot camp.
Yeah. I think we don't use vocalism as much as you do.
No. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I haven't had much experience with recruit training since then. We'll talk about it later. I was a part of phase 2 for us, so essentially your infantry side of the house after boot camp. So I was an instructor there. So I've never really gone back, but certainly from memory. And then I have a lot of friends that are drill instructors, and it's a hard job, and it's just really 2 different missions. How the product they're producing and the methodologies they use, and then what you have over here. And I see the benefits on both sides, but it's definitely. When I came over here, I was like, oh, that would have been nice. I would have much preferred that method if given the choice.
Yeah, but I think we also do some reverse psychology, whether it's I keep using this word all the time, a Britishism, where, we give them something to do or give a task.
Yeah.
And then if they don't achieve the standard that we want, instead of bawling, screaming and shouting, we put the ownership back on them. Well, this is what I used to do. And I'd tell them like I was super in a nice manner.
There's the dad voice.
Yeah, in a really nice manner. And then, make them feel really awkward about it, and I think shouting at somebody will install fear into them a little bit. But I was shouted at quite a lot when I was in training. Yeah. And did I learn from it? Probably not. I was probably more scared to do something wrong than to learn from it and do it correctly.
I think that's a really good point. I think there was definitely fear on my part. I mean, I was 17 at the time, and yet I'd had a bit of introduction. And cool thing about here, side note for anybody stateside that's listening, is like you can come over here and you can join when you're 16, yeah? Whereas I think they've even kind of loosened off doing it. You know, I don't have many recruiter friends anymore, but they've kind of loosened off. So I joined like I was just 17. And so I was in my fleet unit after I graduated. You know, all that. Fast forward for a sec. I mean, I promoted to PFC, the next rank for us, and I was still 17. So I'd been in the Corps. I only passed out in I think April, just a few months, but I was still 17 for quite some time before legally become an adult in the States. So I think it's really good that you offer that opportunity to younger people, because I think that age that's where I found 16 is where it was a really rocky road for me. And I'm sure it is for a lot of younger men and women. And I think if given that opportunity before that started to happen, it might have benefited me. So I think that's a really good program you guys got going on.
Yeah, I think if you join at 16, though, that's my personal opinion. I think it's a little bit too young because you don't have any life experience.
True. So it mixed bag, isn't it? Because some people might not want the life experience they're about to get, depending on the situation, and some people might need it depending on everyone's different, obviously.
I think maturity levels is a big thing because for me, when I joined, I was I went to the careers office when I was 17. And I joined training when I was 17. I was 18. But I was still mentally quite immature. So, I mean, and like we just talked about, I'd never been shouted at like that before. I'd never had that discipline installed into me harshly before. And I think for somebody that's 16 years old, probably not mentally immature enough. Don't get me wrong.
Take it on board.
Yeah, there probably are some 16-year-olds that have had to grow up like super quick, whether it's a bad family background and they've had to be more mature and more responsible than some more, let's call it privileged people, kids. It's a mega culture shock, and then I would probably say, unless you're mentally determined, the failure rate from those people is probably higher than they are if they were more mature. But then I think if you're a little bit older and you've got a little bit of life experience behind you, you can turn around and actually go, well, actually, I've had a job, I've done this, I've done that. And you can make those choices when you're in that sort of program within recruit training, where you can sort of go, well, actually, I can compare this. I'm not saying don't join up at 16. I'm just saying, you've got to be careful.
It's two different options, and I think everything in life we kind of walk that knife's edge as far as where we should be, and what works and what doesn't work. And I'm in a privileged position right now with this job to be able to see both sides of the fence, or at least try and remember what our side of the fence looks like. But, it's a different product. And, obviously I said we have different methodologies with USMC boot camp, and they've got 13 weeks. And that's not a long time to turn around a good product to then go on to phase 2. So they've got their work cut out for them. So it's not me saying that yelling doesn't work. It's got its place, especially when you're not getting the results that you need. You walk that knife's edge once again, though, like you've got nowhere to go at a certain point. So and they do a great job of kind of dialing in when and where and how much to do it. And they've turned it into an art form, but you are absolutely right. And especially trainings over here is 32 weeks. 32 weeks. So it's quite a much longer time, and you've got phase 2 in there as well. So when you do the math on ours as far as phase 1 and phase 2, I think we're just like a few weeks behind you guys. I'd have to crunch the math again. So and we get a break in the middle. So COVID obviously is a little bit different now, I think. I don't think they're allowed to go home. But at the time, I did my 13 weeks, which is really good. And I got probably the finishing of the discipline that I really needed as a younger man.
That's your phase 1, right?
It is, yeah. So that 13 weeks, whether you go to Paris Island, which is the East Coast, or whether you go San Diego, you get that 13 weeks, your phase 1. And for the first 12 weeks, at least when I went through, because they've done it differently over the years. So it was a bit different like the year before I joined, and then it was the way I did it for a little while, and they changed it again, and they've changed back. So they're really trying to dial in the best product to deliver to the wider Fleet Marine Force. So the first 12 weeks, not allowed to talk to yourself the first person. So it's this recruit, request permission to speak, request permission to do everything, obviously. And that last week after we did our culminating event, which is called the Crucible, it was like 72 hours, like 3 days event. You get I think it was like 2 MREs, and somebody stole one of mine. So it was great. I was just hanging out. Skinny little kid back then. Obviously, things have changed. But it's one of those to where you're really finding yourself. And then you get that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor presented to you, and highly emotional, probably one of the most emotional moments of my life within the military, outside of any operation or adversity. And that description's highly emotional for everybody, but it's designed for that. So you get that feeling of accomplishment. And then now you're a Marine. Now you've got this feeling, and you walk around that last week, kind of similar to King Squad. Like you're the top troop on camp. You go back up, you're sorting out your administration, you're getting your leave at the time. So it's sorting out being able to go home, getting 10 days before I went on to phase 2. So I got a bit of time off. So you've got that accomplishment as you walk around. I mean, you're still getting marched around. It's not your own program, but as you move around, you're like, right, I am a Marine. And it's definitely a switch. It's designed that way, but it feels good. Yeah.
So phase 2, just explain a little bit about that.
So phase 2, you move on to, so you go to the School of Infantry, and it's got 2 subcategories depending on, you call them specs. So for us, it's MOS, which is a military occupation specialty. So it's what your job is in the military. And every branch of service has them. And whether it's like the Army has letters and numbers, and the Marine Corps and the Navy just operate off a 4-digit code. So I joined as an 0311, which is for us is just our run-of-the-mill, it's just straight across the board infantry. So I went aboard and I went to the subspec, which is ITB, which is your Infantry Training Battalion. If you are any other designator besides 03, which is any non-infantry subspec MOS, you go across to MCT, which is your Marine Combat Training. You get like a very abridged, compressed version of what you need to thrive and survive in combat should it arise. So they'll only do a month of that, and then they'll move on into whatever school they might have, because we've got things like like aviation mechanic, like guys that are going to schools that are so intensive they've got to sign on a longer contract, which is another difference. You got to re-up every 4 to 5 years depending on what you signed up for. But some of these guys are going to another school that lasts up to like a year. So I mean, it's just crazy that I went for 2 months to get my infantry knowledge. Like, yeah, infantry Marine, and then like I've got guys that are getting like world-class instruction on how to work on aircraft. So I'm like, did I make the right choice? I don't know. But I picked what was right for me. But that's your phase 2, and within that 2 months, your first month in ITB is essentially your common skills, which is everyone does the exact same thing. We all go to the ranges together. We're learning the ins and outs of a rifle. Obviously, you qualify with a rifle in boot camp, but it's a bit different when you're learning how to employ it, move it, hit different targets. And then at that split, essentially at the 1 month mark, all the volunteers or guys that had contracts for advanced weapons, so your mortars, your machine guns, they'll then branch off and they got their own platoon. They're going to weapons, and they get a lot more classroom instruction on like your heavy machine guns, disassembly, reassembly of your bigger moving parts, while we're doing a lot more movement pieces. And then at the end of that 2 months, we all meet up and we have a combined arms exercise where the machine guns are going, the mortars are going, we're moving, we're shooting. So it's really cool to look back on it, especially as I went back as an instructor and see how that all comes together.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
So you passed out phase 2. When did you pass out?
That was 2000. I think I finished up all my training April or May. It's kind of trouble remember. Yeah, 2000, April and May. Finished up training and got our orders. So you learned last week where you're going. Everyone's like, oh, maybe I'll go to Hawaii. And that's like the big one, like, ooh.
That's got to be the most sought after one, right?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, even later on in life, you don't get a whole lot of choice in the matter, but like you're always whispering around as like, recruits here, or, I was a Marine, then obviously it was a private, whispering around like, oh, where we're going, but like, I hear you can go to Hawaii. And we're like, no way. Like, it didn't even make sense to me that we would have like, a base. I knew a little bit about the military. I knew a bit about the Marines at that point. You learn which bases are where. But I was like, is that a real thing? You can honestly go to Hawaii? But yeah, it is quite sought after even now. But people sit on the fence. Like, some people do not want to go to Hawaii because it's a big move, especially if you have a family. And if you're family orientated, like trying to get home and see friends and family, it can be quite expensive at times. If, you're not getting like cheap military flights, because sometimes you don't find out you're getting leave until the last minute. But I loved it, so I don't want to get ahead of myself on that. But get orders come down after I graduated, and I'm just going over the hill. So we're, no top secret information, but where we're sat, the School of Infantry, my unit was like a 10-minute drive away. So the buses just showed up, got on, went up and over the hill to San Mateo, and I checked into 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And I was assigned to Charlie Company. So Charlie 15 is kind of where I grew up in the Corps. And it's, I think everyone's first unit probably holds a special place in their heart. And I still talk to those guys all the time. They have a reunion every year, and it's really a great bunch of individuals that I came in with and that were my seniors that brought me into the fold.
Do you end up staying in, when you go to your unit, do you end up staying there, or do you get drafted around like we do? So, in the Marines, you get an 18-month to 2-year term where you are, and then you get, if you're lucky, you might get extended, but then you get drafted out to somewhere else, and you kind of bounce around everywhere and do bits of everything.
Yeah, and it is the same, although our terms are a bit longer. So you call it time on station. And usually when you sign up for your next draft, essentially your next enlistment, you'll serve the majority of that enlistment, barring promotions and movings and getting pinged for special things. You usually stay there about 3 years, which back then was usually about 2 deployments. So between 3 and 4 years, depending on how that lines up, in peacetime back then, you would do the 2 deployments, and that would, unless you re-enlisted, that would essentially be you. You'd be done. But after that, yeah, you could put in like, okay, I've done my time. I'd like to go somewhere else. So the guys that I came in with, a lot of them went on the MSG program, so they went around the world and guarded the embassies. So there are some really amazing things that you can do in the USMC as far as going around and seeing other places. But usually you've got to put in a few years at that unit, barring special circumstances.
Did you get the I don't know what you call your new pass outs or whatever? We
join and run.
Yeah, we call them sprogs, but
yeah, I think we'll leave some names out of it, and I think a couple of them will be listening to this. But yeah, so when I checked in on, you go to supply and you're getting hurried around, and of course, you got your salty, as we call them, lance corporals, guys that have done one peacetime deployment and think they're all that. So it's probably a bit similar here.
They're the worst ones,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, so salty. I've been to Okinawa once. Let me tell you the what for as far as life. But no, they're really good dudes, and they really developed me because I think I checked in with a bit of an attitude. Go figure. I don't think boot camp or SOI fully got rid of it, but my team leader certainly helped me get rid of it when I checked in. So you get all your bits, your supply issue, your gear as we call it, helmet, flak jacket, CBA, and I get all my stuff and I'm packing it in my little 3-man room, and I was like, oh wow, I get my essentially your own room, but you're sharing it with 2 dudes. I'm not in a squad bay with like 100 dudes anymore, so that's like, yes, I've arrived. And one of the salty lance corporals was like, oh, team leader wants to see you. I was like, okay. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, just get your helmet on, your flak jacket. Yeah, all right. Yeah, put that on. You're gonna line up. You're gonna check in. I was like, all right. I thought I already checked in. Well, save you the story, but you pound on the hatch, go in, and you essentially check in, and everyone welcomes you to the unit, and just leave it at that. And after a bit of time, I was quite skinny then. Some of these were some big boys, some big weightlifting guys, and that's one big differences you'll see between USMC and Royal Marines. It's just like, especially back then, the different focuses on fitness. They welcomed me aboard, let me know where my attitude stood and some changes I should probably make if I wanted to be successful. And gave me some solid mentorship. We'll leave it there.
Yeah, along with some few bruises.
I guess. Yeah. I think I think I earned probably all of those though. But yeah, we had small adjoining run, and kind of cultures, right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, especially back then, culture changed, culture evolves. We'll call it that. There's large drinking culture back then, and not saying there's not one now. Easy, guys, if you're listening.
Well, it's eased off a bit. I mean, it has. There was a big drinking culture here too. Yeah. But, like you're saying, the focus on training has gone from, running to weightlifting. And I'm not saying people are a little bit more, they aim for aesthetics as opposed to, functional fitness. But, there's a lot of that really. And
that's a really good point. The aesthetic side of the house, where I think fitness used to maybe revolve more around mission sets back then. I mean, there wasn't CrossFit. There was not CrossFit in 2000. There's nothing against CrossFit. Easy, guys. But my introduction to, and I'll leave his name out of it because he'll find me and probably crucify me. But my first platoon sergeant was probably one of the best runners I've ever come into contact with. And, I mean, the negative aspect of it back then, because back then you were a Marine, you expected to be hard, so you toe the line, you do as told when told, have a bit of initiative in individual actions, but if I tell you to do something, you better do it. And that's kind of the culture where it was, and I think since then we've really got a solid fighter-leader concept going on, and we really want thinking Marines. We want people to think for themselves, be able to take the orders still, but maybe you can contribute something as well. Yeah. Especially as you go team leader, squad leader, and you come up through the ranks. But introduction to physical training once I hit the fleet was very punishment-oriented. So I got to be a halfway decent runner very quickly, but it was not by choice. That was not something that was my fun to-dos. But he used to really take us out. Something happened. All we do is drop our blouses. We'd be in our undershirt and our combats, and then away we'd go. It felt like the speed of light, but he's quite fast. And I actually worked for him later on in life as well, and we had a chuckle about it. But he was probably one of the best platoon sergeants at that time. Obviously, he's certainly promoted since then, but one of the best guys I've ever came into contact with. And we'll talk about it probably in a little bit, but he actually afforded me the opportunity when I was potentially going to get kicked out of the Marine Corps for some medical stuff that happened a little bit later in life. Kept me on, gave me the opportunity to kind of overcome that. And the only reason I'm still here is because he kind of gave me a chance.
It's a good point, isn't it, really? When you're younger, you don't need to, but the older guys, you always kind of have a focus on, don't you? You always kind of need a role model, whether you've had that positive role model when you were younger or not.
Yeah.
But then there's always a guy that you go, he's pretty good. I want to be like him. And then you kind of set your standards by him. Now, if you end up joining somewhere that's got a bunch of absolute turd bags in it, your example set there is going to be a little bit wrong, especially guys, especially when I was a younger Marine. There were some bullies there. Well, you would call them bullies these days. But I guess that their mindset was they had it done to them, so they should do it to you, which is completely the polar opposite to the way that I kind of look at things too.
You've got that, it's easy to have, well, maybe not easy, but it's good to have that objective mindset now, and it's, what was done to me, I'll just amplify that and do that to the next guy. I think that resides quite hard in military culture, especially when it comes to training. Like, I did this and this. Okay, well, let's add this on. Where if you don't understand the methodology, you've changed it now, and now you might not be achieving the same goal or aim that initial drill or training exercise might have had. So it just turns into one-upmanship, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I had pretty much a really good blend. I had some really good guys when I checked in that I looked up to. I had some really good team leaders. And, I mean, they put up with me. I was a skinny kid with a mouth. I was trying to make my way. I had guys I was serving alongside that were some heavy hitters. They were just big dudes. They did really well. Whereas in, aspects, I was still struggling, coming up through. I'm not going to say I checked into Charlie 1.5 and all of a sudden I'm best thing since sliced bread. I certainly wasn't. So I had some guys to my left and right that really helped me along the way. And I think I've been in the fleet, 2 months? I pinned on private first class, which is E2 for us. Is our next rank, which you get after 6 months. Some people get it in boot camp. Some people sign on by doing X amount, getting other people to join. So there's a couple different ways you can pick up those first couple ranks. I think I'd been in about 2 months, and we're doing a fast roping exercise in the backyard. So we're about to go into one of our urban training facilities there on Pendleton. And we're staged out in the backyard, which is a massive open area. And Charlie Company is a helo company, if I hadn't mentioned that before. And we've done a slick run, so we just, camis fast roping on the bottom of the CH-46 twin rotor. Don't use them anymore, so we just refer to them as the frogs, so we don't use that helicopter anymore. And done the first run great. You put your gear on, you put your kit on. You do the second run, it's like, all right, feeling a bit Hollywood here. This is awesome. And obviously you go out of the tower, you get some competency before that, so it's not like I was thrown to the wolves. Well, third run, you put your pack or your Bergen on. I was a saw gunner, so at the time, so that's a bit more automatic, light machine gun, squad automatic weapon. There's different schools of thought there. And full gear, go up, going down. It's my turn to go out the hell hole, which is in the middle of the bird, and I get stuck. Get stuck there. Pack gets hung up, and I'm all right. What do I do next? I'm looking at no one's really kind of some other stuff going on. People are focusing elsewhere, good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm trying to self-clear, which is probably not the best thing to do. Probably should leave that to the professionals. And next thing I know, I'm doing about the speed of light down the rope. And because of the weight, and because, like I said, I was a skinny kid, I was just trying to reacquire the rope and just get a clamp on it so I could get a break. And that was probably the last thing I remembered. I come to, I'm on the ground, got the rope flapping about, hit me in the face. And one of our machine gun attachments, because at this point in time I was still just a straight, call them crunchies. I was just a normal 0311, obviously saw gunner for the squad. And he's kind of slapping me awake. And I was like, hold on, why am I asleep? Sleeping on the job. But I realized my helmet's gone. It's probably about 10, 15 feet away. My weapon's gone into pieces. It's held together by pins, so that's gone. It's in pieces over there. And my only thought is, well, I should really get up. I need to get out of here because the next guy's going to come down the rope, and I'm in the way. I'm a hindrance. So I just tried to sit up, and something's not right. So it turns out I couldn't feel my legs, and long story short, eventually I could. Let's just get that out there now. But I couldn't initially stand up on my own. So that guy, we just refer to him as Anderson. He helps me up and get somebody else helping me up. I was like, no, I've got this. I can stand on my own 2 feet, right? So they're like, all right, well then move your butt, get out of here, giving me words of encouragement that I don't know if I can say on here or not. So I get,
swear.
Oh, cool. That makes life easier for me. I've been biting my tongue this whole time. Thanks. Now you tell me.
No.
It's not part of the brief. So I get moving, right? I take what I thought was a step, which wasn't. I just essentially face planted because what it turns out was I had a compression fracture, which pinched a few nerves, and I lost a bit of my height in the long run. But it wasn't connected. So the legs weren't working. They weren't getting the signal they needed to be getting. And essentially at the moment I was paralyzed not momentarily, but for a short period of time. And you just see this little dot getting bigger and bigger in the distance as it's running towards me, and it's the corpsman just flapping his arms saying, "Don't fucking touch him." It's like, oh, cool. They get me in, get me out to the hospital where we're at, because Pendleton's quite big. It's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's quite a large base. They get me in an ambulance and they take me to a civilian hospital. Lights blaring, this, that, and the other, and get me out there. And keep in mind, I am still a 17-year-old kid that is duct tape to a spinal board because they couldn't think of what else to do to keep me immobilized at the time, Go figure, the corpsman didn't have a spine board at the time, but those are the times we were in. So I'm duct taped to this spine board. And they get me to Mission Viejo Hospital, which is a really nice town if you've not been. Good surfing there. You'd like it. And they just leave me there. So I'm in this waiting room for probably about 5 minutes and just eyeballs only trying to look around. I'm like, any danger? Hello? Hello? And so someone came up. Oh, what are you doing here? I fell out of a helicopter. I'm like, oh. And that kind of sparks alarms. It's probably, I could have used different verbiage to maybe calm that down a bit. So that ensued a little bit of a panic. They get me in, they do whatever scans. I can't even remember. And I was just at that time starting to feel a little bit of pain. Because at that point I was like, oh, I'm perfectly fine. Obviously, something's gone wrong here, but I'm all right. But the nurse comes out. And I don't remember her name, but her bedside manner was horrible. Because the first words she came out and told this young 17-year-old kid who couldn't feel his legs and was duct taped to spinal board was, oh, honey, you broke your back. I was like, oh, and here come the emotions. Here comes the waterworks. So like, oh God, I'm not going to walk again. Long story short, that didn't happen. But it took about another day, I don't know why it took so long. I was starting to get my feeling back. There's a lot of pain. Everything started firing as it should be. Compression fracture, just how it fell, I'm not sure. But essentially the pack saved the rest of my back because the packs we were using at the time, the kidney pad, drove up and isolated that and gave me a compression fracture. So then I was on light duty for a very long time, which was not a good thing back then. We've had a massive culture change, but back then you just did not go to medical. You did not want to be seen to that guy, to be taken away from the unit, to be sat in the back, just chilling out. So it was very, very negative culture. And I think it's probably because there's some people that take advantage of it. You call them, light duty is what we call it. And you become a light duty ranger or warrior, then you get a bad reputation. But I was that way for some months. Kind of over here where you have to sit boards and all that and make sure you're still medically qualified or you're going to hit the road. And I was coming up for a board. They ended up sticking me in the company office, which a lot of guys that know me from back then have a chuckle about this. So I get and I know nothing of computers. And back in 2000, a lot of people did. So here I am banging keys in 2001. They felt that I was fit enough to go on deployment. So I got to go to Okinawa. So we do a rotation out there in Japan, and I found myself in the company office. Was probably the worst thing, best/worst thing that's ever happened to me. Because as a young dude at that age where I got to take a step back and see the other side of the house, seeing how the officers and senior staff NCOs are actually managing and how things work. So that was kind of cool to see. So it was an opportunity for that aspect. But I was coming up on my medical board. And I told you earlier, my platoon sergeant at the time, he's like, right, you're gonna get out processed because you can't do a PFT, which is our physical fitness test. If you can't do that, then you're not fit. At that time, it was a different time. Nowadays, you can still stay on until your injury and all this other stuff is fixed. You can get rehabbed. But back then, you can't operate as a Marine. You didn't have wounded warrior. You didn't have any of that stuff. Not that I would have qualified, but we didn't have the same resources we had today. So he's like, right, can you do a PFT? Keep in mind, I'd probably been doing things as an underage Marine, shouldn't have been doing. My phys routine, my workout routine had not been great because of the back pain, and we're in Okinawa and there's not a whole lot to do out there if you can't put weight on. You either do weights or you join the drinking culture, or if you're smart, which I wasn't, then you take advantage of some of the other things like scuba diving and hiking, and you do smart things, which I think I visited one castle when I was there, and that was it. So he's like, right, you got a fitness test tomorrow. You got to pass it. I was like, oh, brilliant. I showed up and probably did the most painful, ugliest fitness test I'd ever done in my life. And I got a first class by 1 point, so I ran a 226, and I was able to stay on, and I was able to stay in the Corps. And so he gave me that opportunity, which I essentially disregarded medical, shredded my light duty shit, and said I'm not going to do this anymore. So never had surgery on it, and wonders of the human body. It just kind of sorted itself out, and here I am today.
It's probably not done you any favours for your future, though, has it?
There might have been some follow-on effects that have come down the pipeline. Hip impingement, one leg being longer than the other, and really good knee joint. No pain down there at all, so that's great.
So, when did you do your PFT and get reinstated?
So that was on that deployment. That's 2001, and I want to say that was May time frame because I'd done a few months over there before it came down to it. And he gave me the opportunity at that point, like, right, good to go. That happened. And now I'm fit to train again. I'm fit to do that. And we're about to come back. We come back off that deployment. So this is 2001. Mm-hmm. So, I think we can kind of see what's coming at this point.
See what's coming right up here.
So at this point, I'd forced myself to learn about computers. And at that time, the way rotations worked, at least in Mateo for all the 5th Marines, is you do a workup, which is, I think it was like 6 months. You deploy 6 months. You come back. You're on guard duty for 6 months. So we'd come back. We took guard duty. And what that is essentially you stand sentry on the armory and all these little posts that we had at the time. And we've kind of changed business that way. But you essentially guard the essential things, and you run the guard room. So if something happens on camps, you're like a react force. So it was a guard room, but because I'd learned about computers in that day and age, people are still using AOL, which is unheard of now. I got myself a cush job in the guard room doing the morning report, and all I had to do was, because I could hit 10 keys and hit enter, and the staff sergeant that was there couldn't, got myself a cush job. But September time frame, find myself there, and going into the guard room, business is normal. I'm sending the morning report, and I'm looking around, and bit of movement where there's not many people on camp. This is kind of an easy routine that we find ourselves in, and get over there. My buddy comes running out of the guard room, and he's like, they got us. I mean, how are you supposed to respond to that? I just turned 18, just coming back off my first deployment. Like, what do you mean they got us? And I walked in the guard room just in time to see they had this old, like, projection TV mass. It's probably twice as big as it needed to be. TV, where if the sun hits it, you can't see it. It's a weird glare. I walked in just in time to see the second plane hit the towers. So it was like, different. Every generation has its tragedy. Like, ask older generation, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Where were you the moon landing? Where all these key mark events. I think 9/11 is probably generationally one of the big ones. You you look back and where were you?
Yeah.
So that was me. Where were you at?
I was so I passed out of training in May 2001. May 2001, early that year, and I was on leave. I think. I was on leave, and I was at an old school friend's house, and his mum phoned the house up because we were watching. We used to watch loads of Chad films like Blade and Bloodsport and stuff like that. All the classic old cliche
good
ones.
films. What are you on about? Oscar award winning.
Yeah,
come on.
That's why I joined the Marines. And his mum ran a pub in my local town in Redditch. And she rang up the house and said, turn on the news, and turned on the news. And just like you, when you walked into the I was like that, boom. Plane flew into the building, and I was like that.
Yeah.
And then my initial thought was, I know where I'm going to be in a few months' time.
Well, you're smarter than me, because I didn't know what thought to think. And then obviously the scenario that day.
Goosebumps, look.
Yeah,
goosebumps
yeah. And that day just obviously got worse, and it's by no means making light of the day. It's just you remember back and try and remember what was in your head. And I was absolutely dumbfounded. An 18-year-old kid. Didn't have arguably a whole lot of life experience behind me. I didn't have that foresight to be like, oh yeah, well, clearly I'll be on deployment. Things are going through the roof around camp. People are starting to patrol, pull people out of cars. Like, dude, I work here. And obviously the reaction was over the top.
Well, you like being over the top anyway, don't you? Being
maybe a little bit.
I don't think you can really comprehend unless you're an American. Because without sort of stereotyping...
Here we go.
No. Without stereotyping Americans, the majority of the population are quite patriotic, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, there's no two ways about that. I would say the majority, and obviously times are changing, and you've got, injustices and horrible things going on, in the country. And, I mean, there's no two ways about that. But the response is one side or the other. I'm not going to get involved in that. But.
I mean, my point being is that the response to what everybody thought and felt during that time.
Oh, that time, yeah.
Even though, would you say it was over the top? I don't know, but nothing could ever happen like that before in history, bar the Second World War. You had the mass atrocities and stuff like that that happened there, or
Pearl Harbor.
Or in some,
the bombings as well. So we had, the bombings in Beirut. We had a few others.
There's a few build-up, but to that extent where somebody attacks a Western major city,
multiple as well, yeah,
like New York, like the Pentagon, and the other places that they tried to fly planes into. We had the bombings in London.
Yeah.
They weren't on the mass casualty scale like 9/11 was, but I think the whole point of that really is that, when those towers fell, they not only took out all the people that worked there, but it was the surrounding environment, and it was just the
first responders, everyone,
and it was the sheer neck of it as well.
It's hard to put into words the feelings then, and I'm not. Once again, it wasn't me saying that the country went over the top. It's just what we were doing on camp then was, we didn't know what to do. How do you respond to something that happened? And so the security ramped up, and our actions might have been a bit over the top. But as a country, there's probably not been a time other than, like you said, World War II, because even Korean War, a bit of motivation and patriotism behind it. Arguably not a whole lot for Vietnam. That probably caused its own problems. But when that happened, I don't think America probably had a cohesive time, like you said, a patriotic time like it had during that period. And I mean, and you see the memes on the internet now, and it's like, you promise you'd never forget. And, it's where we were arguably with, hand in hand, united, a common goal. And that's what happens when you have a travesty like that. It unites, and you unite against it. You stand against it, whatever that is. And I think you're right. I think where we were as a country was quite unified, and maybe not so much anymore.
I got to pause it there. I got to go for a piss.
Fair one.
Right, we're back. Okay, September 11th then. Twin Towers got hit.
Yep.
You were in your, you're in your depot, and you've gone in and watched on the TV. What happened for you after that?
Well, we started ramping up. And we originally thought we were going straight away. We were getting spun up, and we were doing training, getting ready. In 2002, we thought we were going to go. A different unit got to go, so I mean, we pretty much staged, ready to go, and someone else got the call. So we stood down and ended up doing some other training, doing some mountain warfare training, stuff like that. And then we started to hear whispers that something else might be going on, because obviously this is all the early days of Afghan at this point, in which we thought we were going to be involved in. Obviously we weren't. And we start hearing other whispers, and we start noticing that training's changing a little bit, and start hearing whispers about Iraq and stuff going on with that. And it gets to, I think it was probably about October of 2002, I think it was, is you're pretty much getting the word like, hey, this is happening. We're, change gears now. We're going into Iraq. And so you start getting that, and, really start grinding in the training. And it's an interesting point at this time, just kind of me getting from 2001 to 2002. So I mentioned I kind of was a computer guy. I wasn't a computer guy, but I ended up in a company office doing a computer job. And I wasn't happy with that, especially after what happened. No one, I don't think, wants to be stuck behind a computer after 9/11. So, right, I need to get out of here. So I ended up actually taking a slap on the wrist because I sandbagged a little bit of work, and those listening know it for fact. So I ended up kind of sandbagging work a little bit to get kicked out of the company office. So I messed up a few details, and I get the boot back to a rifle platoon. They were kind of full up, so they sent me over to machine guns. So I think after 2 years in the Corps, I finally found my home, what felt like my home, and I really love my machine gun brothers. Like I fit in. It's the only place I probably really felt home as a younger Marine. So I was a Lance Corporal at the time. You guys call them Lance Jacks, but Lance Corporal at the time. Now I got promoted when I was on that Okinawa deployment. Got my E3 and moved over to machine guns. I'm learning more of the ins and outs of that. Obviously, I'd kind of spent time on it, but they really took me to school and they took me in as part of their own. So I ended up being a part of a machine gun team with some real characters, some really good people in machine guns. Guys I still talk to today really kind of showed me the ropes. And I had a really good friend at the time of mine. He was, keep in mind, I'm 18 at the time. It's 2002. Take that back. I'm now 19. And I think at the time I'll mess up his age. Pick me up for later. But I think he's like 26. And he ends up being the gunner as it works. So because he has the experience, he works the gun because he knows more about the gun than I do. He's been to school for long. He's much more experienced as a machine gunner than I am. Somehow I end up as the team leader. So now I'm trying to, which is essentially you're directing fire. So it sounds cooler than what it is. You're just trying to make sure that the rounds you're a spotter essentially. And then you got your ammo man, which we ended up not having one when we went in. But he's 26. What am I going to tell this dude? This guy's got way more life experience, but ended up learning as much as I could ever try and teach him. And me and him developed a really good relationship during the subsequent deployment, and then also when we got back, as far as how he ended up really taking over, because I ended up, we'll talk about that in a minute, but he really just took me to school. Well, he and I ended up, as part of this machine gun section, you get kind of tasked out. So every platoon will get a squad, which is 2 teams. So they get 2 guns because they obviously are employed in pairs. Pick 'em deep, boys. I remember. But it comes January time frame, and it's we're getting time to get on the plane. So we're working towards it. I think it's January, February. It's hard to remember, boys. We end up flying over stage in Kuwait, LSA 5. So because you were there.
Yeah, I did the invasion.
Yeah, same. So where'd you guys end up staging up? Because there was Brits with us, but I think, if my memory serves, it was Royal Fusiliers. Yeah, I know. Not Royal Marines.
Yeah, it was probably. No, I wasn't staged in Kuwait for the initial invasion. I was over in Cyprus.
Ah, yeah, okay.
And then we flew into the Al Jazeera and did some stuff around there.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we get staged up in this LSA, and there's all gas drills, and you've got chickens out there trying to detect gas. Well, they just die because of the dust, so everyone's freaking out. And we kind of established almost like a routine there of training. Are we going to go? Is this going to be another desert storm? Is this going to be another 90-hour? We've all seen Jarhead, and Jarhead hadn't come out yet, but if you look at it now, that's what you didn't want life to be like, is just that horrible routine. And I think back to it now, and we ended up having like a sports day, which seems like weird, like we're miles away from Iraq. We have a sports day. Somehow they've sourced like pizza. I mean, you've been on nothing but rations. So we got pizza, we got mail for the first time. Like, looking back, it's all the signs are clear. But at the time, you're like, oh, this is a really great day. I'm having a blast. We had like a squad comp, which we won, which me and my gunner won. I'll just go ahead and name drop you, Custer. You're out there. So we won. So we didn't have sentry that night. So we didn't fire watch. We're like, yes. Well, I spent all night writing replies to my letters instead of getting sleep like I should have got. Well, I get head down, get in my sleeping bag, and about an hour later, just lights come on. well, we're going, grab your crap, we're going. I was like, well, that's great. There goes all the sleep I should have got. So I'm trying to pack all my crap and get to the Amtracs. We then push forward closer to the border and get staged up a few miles away. We're digging, massive, U-shaped fighting positions, machine gun positions, staging up, ready to go. And then obviously we end up crossing to one of the craziest times I think most guys that were involved with that probably experienced. I mean, because you go from peacetime, unless you've gone to Afghan, obviously. But for someone who didn't go to Afghan before Iraq, it's kind of what you felt like you trained for the entire time. Because as an infantryman, you never actually get to do your job unless you go to war. You just train and make the next guy better, and you get better and you train. And the only metric you have are training scenarios and someone grading your training scenario. But now everything's on the line and you're crossing the line of departure. And, it was a horrible word because you'd be in the back, you're loaded into these sardine cans. And
so the Amtracs are amphibious.
Yeah, so those are the ones that can splash down, ship to shore capability. And they've been several iterations.
Yeah.
God, how they held together. God bless Amtracs, because they got us there. I mean, not all of them, because we execute what's called the bump plan. I think at the end we had somehow squeezed like 42 people into one Amtrak. Some guy like 3 seats down was tying on this boot, while the guy's 3 seats that way is fixing your other boot. It was good to be a machine gunner, because then once we got past that point, obviously we crossed and buttoned up, and for the chemical and the artillery and all that threat that we had. Once we were able to open up the top, then me and my gunner was like, yeah, we're going up top. We'll do flank security since the guns are covering the front, and we'll get up there and we'll get a bit of fresh air. So a little bit of profit there, a little bit of not getting stuck down at the bottom. So that was good, but it was probably, and I find later on in life I've got a really bad memory, and we'll get into that later. But I can remember so many details, and not just the bad stuff, but just abstract memories from that time that are just so vivid, that come with, smells, shapes, colors, like the whole thing's there. And
I still get it now.
Yeah, and I'm sure most people do. It's not me trying to sound special, but I find it insane how the body can hold on to that at the sacrifice of like so many other memories. And I cherish that, because there's so many good ones that are there as well, with really great people. But it's one of the things I really find special, that we can kind of hold on to those memories, good with the bad. Yeah, it's one of the things that it's kind of hard to think about sometimes.
So you push over the line of departure. You're pushing along in your Amtrac. You're up top cover with your number 2 or number 1 on your machine gun.
He might as well be called number 1. He was arguably better than me and getting more trigger time. So he's the better of the two of us for sure.
Okay, so you're pushing forward inevitably.
Yeah, we're going somewhere. We're going somewhere.
The Star Wars effect happens with Tracer.
Yeah. It dulls the senses after a while, but the first few go rounds, and you didn't get really. We had a few get out, few contacts. There were skirmishers. At one point we're like online. There's some Republican Guard. When we first crossed, we get the word and this is the bad word. Like, you gas up, gas mask on, gas mask off, all clear. But when we're crossing, right? So we're all looking at each other. No gas mask on. We're like, okay, we'll get the word anytime now. It's about 20 minutes later. The troop commander that was sat in the seat with the radio and all that turns around with his gas mask on, saying "all clear." Oh, thanks, bud. We're looking at each other like, what? So this whole time we kind of sat there, just kind of wondering what was going on. And he didn't feel like passing the word to the rest of us. We might want to put on a gas mask. That was really cool. But yeah, there was a few lights displays, both outgoing and incoming, and kind of stopped off the oil fields first. Oil fields were on fire, so there's so many visual things going on. And other units probably had it as bad or worse than us. It's not saying it was like Mogadishu cracking off. But we had skirmishers and conflicts moving up, some room clears, some street clears, moving up towards moving up Route 1, inevitably going to Baghdad. Yeah.
What was your from that whole deployment or that invasion? What was what's like your most prominent memory of it?
That I don't know how the human body, and this is not me trying to talk it up, but genuinely, I don't remember more than 30 minutes of sleep at a time. And I don't know if it was just I felt like a permanent adrenaline high. And there's other like memories that you come up with based on your job and what you're doing there. But like how the human body operated off of, because we're running out of water, so you had like a canteen a day. Lucky to have half an MRE. You get down to it and you're like stealing the humanitarian rations that you're meant to be handing out just because you need the calories. You're going down, and you're living in MOP level 4 at some extent of it. So you're fully all the way up to your gas mask at some point, and you're living in this NBC suit. And you can smell yourself clearly, and you've been in and out of water and puddles and the sweat. Like this thing is no longer working. It's gone past its life shelf. You've been in it for like 3 weeks at this time on the movement up, and you're like, all right, why am I still wearing this? That's probably one of my most prominent memories. Is I stink. I can smell myself. This thing is not working. But just with nothing but training, no real experience other than training to be able to push through and do some of the things that we did, just based off the drills and the training we had. It's probably one of the biggest memories I have. But yeah, like the human body is amazing. That's all it is. We aren't amazing. It's just the human nature and the spirit, I think, is incredible.
Yeah, the only real memory I have, I remember quite a lot of it, but it was the first time I thought I was going to die.
So I had the benefit of the helicopter. So I was good already, right? If it was going to happen, it should have happened already.
Right, this is a this is similar. This is a flying story.
Oh dear.
So we're all packed into a C-130, and we're flying out into the northern Iraq desert. This is what I remember. So
if you were a U.S. Marine, you could have made a song about that and sing it when you run around.
Probably.
Yeah, it'd been great.
But I'd probably sound an idiot because I can't sing.
Me too.
And we'd gone over the border, so we were in Iraq, and we were flying towards the northern desert. And we were all packed in there. We had, anti-tank Milan with us. We had, the 50 cal, so the 50 caliber machine guns with the tripods and all the other bits and bobs.
Loaded for bear.
Ammunition. Our job was to secure a desert ALARP, which is a aviation landing strip for helos and C-130s. That was the job. And we were flying along, and all of a sudden, all the lights and the noise got boo, 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 boo inside. And I was like, oh my God, look, I've got goosebumps again. A surface-to-air missile had been launched at the C-130.
Yeah,
all the chaff went out of it, and there was there was the whole company, so 60, 70 guys all crammed into the back of a C-130 with all of their kit and equipment, and this thing was banking. It was dropping to the height and the elevation.
Yeah, no chance, bud.
Mate, I was like. And there was absolutely nothing you can do.
What are you going to do?
You just sat there like that going, oh my God. I hope. Do you know what? Hats off to I think he was an RAF pilot. Hats off to him because we didn't get hit. Obviously, because I'm still here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Happy.
But yeah, that was the first time I ever went, yeah. There's one of my cat lives gone.
Yeah, see, I'll take an Amtrak any day because you can blow it up, but at least it's not going to crash and firing, ball of horribleness.
We were looking at each other, going, "Oh my God."
Yeah, I'll take the I'll take the sardine can. I've already had one bad experience up in the air. I don't want a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can imagine, especially that helplessness. All we would hear was the ping off the metal. You're like, "Oh, what's that?" Oh, I guess we're going out.
Yeah. But I know we've got 20 minutes left, and so I know you got to shoot off. So one of the things that you did want to talk about is a little bit about mental health and stuff like that. So
we'll do that now.
Yeah, let's do it now, and we can. We've got to. We've only got to 2003. We're at 2020 now, mate. So
God.
we can do a couple of parts of this if you want.
Yeah. So I think the good point to transition with that would be so 2003. We'll just fast forward a bit on Iraq because I think we know how that clearly made it through that. But one that I struggled with is. Actually, and I ended up leaving. Obviously got into Baghdad, and we'll cover that one a little bit later because that's probably one of the craziest things that have ever happened to me. But I got back, and I once again I left I think 2 weeks, maybe a bit more earlier from Iraq. I got what's called a Red Cross message. So essentially, the man that raised me, my grandfather, passed away. So. Arguably one of the worst memories I have from that deployment. I remember it, Chaplain Cash at the time, big chap, like Stackers football playing dude, but was just like a teddy bear, heart of gold. Came across, and I happened to be at the CP at the time. They're like, Chaps wants to talk to you. Chaplain wants to talk. Padre over here wants to talk to you. Okay, cool. I was a lay reader at the time, so which is like if you're in the platoon, you can kind of help the guys and maybe deliver a bit of sermon at the time. So it's something to do with that. No big deal. No thought at all going in, and kind of hands me a piece of paper, doesn't let me look at it. He's like, I just want to tell you that your grandfather passed. Straight, short to the point. It's kind of what you needed. You don't really flap about with that, I don't think. I think he did it the best way he could. I think it grips me is like the second there's like an audible pause after he said it. And there was like an audible pause, enough for me to digest it, to absorb it, and call the prayer hit. And I can just feel the revulsion I felt at that moment of just being in that scenario and being helpless and like, right, I can't, my grandmother's back home, the family's dealing with all this, and how do I deal with it? And then to have that soundtrack come on, doing what we were doing at the time, created its own adversities. So I sat on it, I think, for 2 days, and because of where we were at, and because we'd already consolidated Baghdad, we kind of locked that down. Statue had already been pulled down. They were already talking about retrograding. I was like, well, this was an easy job. And I kind of asked, a bit my command, what I should do, this, that, and the other. And there's probably, and I'm not the first person to go through the struggle, obviously, but the struggle of leaving your unit, your family, to go help and deal with your other families, arguably one of the hardest struggles I've been through. And, I'm still on the fence, some days as far as did I do the right thing? How much help did I give my grandmother versus what could I have still done? And I think there was like 1 or 2 dust-ups after that. After that point, we didn't lose anybody else. So what impact would I really had? But at that time, that anguish, I think, was arguably one of the hardest things I've done. But I got back, and I think 5 months later, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just woke up one day and I was a civvy. So it was a civilian again. So you've got to re-enlist. And my first sergeant at the time was retired Sergeant Major now, Converse, really good dude. So when I worked in the company office at the time, his name's Luke. My name's Beau. And I don't know if you've ever seen a show called Dukes of Hazzard, but there was the company office funny there. And he's a really good guy. He really helped me out in a lot of ways, just by talking to me at that time. And we get back, and we kind of got to figure out. We stabilize, and he's like, we're going back. I need to know. You got to tell me. I was like, literally, I was meant to EAS in I think like 3 weeks, and I still hadn't made a decision. He's like, well, I guess I'll get out. And there's my second anguish decision. And why I made that decision, I kind of was seeing somebody at the time, white picket fence, maybe in my future, 2.5 kids and a dog. I don't know where my head was at, but I made the decision to get out of the Marine Corps. I just turned 21, arguably legal in all things now. So there's a funny one for you. 2 deployments, doing the invasion of Iraq and of Baghdad, come back, promote to corporal. I still can't buy a beer. So that's a really good feeling to be almost 4 years in the Marine Corps with 2 deployments when I'm in combat, to be a non-commissioned officer, think you got something about yourself and you can't go to the bar and buy a beer. So that was another one for my headspace and timing. But I go outside there was no transition back then. There was no, oh, do this, do that. There was no mental health transition. I mean, it wasn't even a thing back then, just kind of shake it off. Maybe you go see the counselor or the chaplain. And
it's still the shell shock era, though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. I mean,
I was listening, digressing a little bit, but I was listening to Joe Rogan yesterday, and he had Oliver Stone. So Oliver Stone directed Platoon. He was in Vietnam. He was in the First Cavalry. So
he's done a few chats for Congress and stuff like that. As well, yeah.
Like his story is absolutely amazing. And he was very similar, where he kind of got to the point where he'd done some tours, because he re-enlisted as well, and he stayed on. 3 extra months before he was supposed to leave Vietnam, and he got back and he was kind of like in that position where, what am I supposed to do?
What now?
And I think, especially if we convert that to modern day, where I've done 20 years. I did the invasion of Iraq. I did the first tours into Afghanistan back in 2001. Finished my last one in 2012. But some guys just don't want to do that. They want to join up. They see all the war films and stuff like that, and they go, right, I want a piece of that. And I've talked about this before, where once they get into, let's call it the shit, where they've got tracer rounds, their friends getting hit, it's just absolutely horrific. Yeah. The worst thing that probably you would ever see, bar being a doctor or a nurse in A&E, where you're exposed to extreme horrific images.
Non-stop,
Yeah. What you come back from there is like, especially for some people, would be, why would I want to stay on and do that again?
Yeah, but that's, well, unless you're something seriously wrong, that's not you. I think you sign on for the glamour of what, like the movie aspect, the special effects, and the feeling once you're there is not doing it because of that. It's the man or the woman to the left and right.
Yeah,
and trying to bring them home, and that camaraderie you feel. I think that generates. I mean, we're tribal by nature, like being that true pack mentality, whether you want to believe it or not. I think that generates a mental health, although it might be some dysfunctional at some levels, but I think it generates that family for some people that arguably never had it. And I think then having the culture shock of trying to find it can be quite hard. So coming out of a 4-year family to where I really probably finished developing, well, not finished, but I went through some large growing pains and learning adjustments to arguably become a man and learn about being a better man and Marine, to then not have that. Keep in mind, I think I'd only had one actual payroll tax-paying job, which I worked for McDonald's assistant manager for a month when I was 16 before I went through my adversity. So I don't have a long resume going on here. So 21-year-old, man now with not much job experience. You got the Marine Corps experience, and America's still very patriotic at this time. So people are like, hire veterans, which has probably helped me out. is probably the only benefit I had going for me. But just refiguring out society is, paying my own rent for the first time. Because military school, I didn't have to pay my own rent. Taxes. And my wife listening now will be like, you still haven't figured out taxes, so shut up. So she'll have a funny on that one. But just really trying to sort out life for yourself was a bit strange for me because I still wasn't with my family. My family's back in Oklahoma, and I ended up, when I became a civilian, I was in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area of California, which is where I met my current wife, who tolerates me on a daily basis. So God bless her. But it was such a steep learning curve. And I'm not saying it's hard, but it's different. And it's different in a way where you're doing it on your own, where you might not have been told what to do, but you understand the network to where now you need to change your wiring. And there's loads of guys that got out. And obviously I came back in. So there's loads of guys that I don't know that I failed to cope because, I did all right. I had a paying job, I was functioning, but you miss certain things, and maybe based on my choices that I made, I felt like I had more to give, or I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to accomplish, and maybe the job wasn't done. And that's kind of where I was at. And I worked odd jobs and security bid, did some armored car work, some personal security, a bounce in a bar, doing some door work, just trying to find myself really. Loads of stupid stuff because you're indoctrinated into a drinking culture at a young age, and acting and saying certain things, as with your military friends is not really a good way to integrate yourself with most of society. So I struggled with that, and I was quite a young guy anyway, working with some older guys, and where the job I worked at, the only really people that I was connecting with that would get my jokes or you would have any rapport with or any banter were the Vietnam vets. So, and there's a large generational gap there, but that's where I felt at home. And it started to make me question, well, why is that? Well, obviously we draw on some military experiences, but why is it so easy for, someone who grew up in a much different time and era to communicate and, just seamlessly transition over a cup of coffee with someone that was, I was far junior to them, and, not only age, but arguably some of the military experiences that they had. Some things in Vietnam are just beyond, discussion as far as what they experienced. But it was just seamless. And it kind of made me think at the time, well, why is that? I mean, I've really evolved in my thought process as far as the pack or tribal mentality. And then, loads of people more educated than I have written books on this, and, New Tribe and all of these other books that are out there. And I think it's something that we need to come to terms with, is determining that there is a mental health, and it's always that like red flag word, mental health issue. It's just adjusting and finding integration. It's finding peace. And you want to call it harmony. You want to call it, fluidity in your life. There's so many terms for it. It's just finding how to operate yourself, whether it's surfing, whether it's finding something that you can channel whatever issues or negative feelings you might be having.
Well, what you're talking about there is you're looking for meaning.
Yeah, there you go.
You're spending that much time. You have all these experiences for guys for 4 years. It doesn't change.
You do words much gooder than me.
Trust me, I don't. People who listen to this podcast know my vocabulary is pretty crap.
Yeah, same.
But the common bond, what you're talking about there as well, I've had a similar experience where, I was with a group of people in combat. I come back, I get injured, I come back, and then all of a sudden when I come back to the unit again, once I've been rehabilitated and all that sort of thing, everybody's gone. So I've lost that conformity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that cohesion that you build with all those people, the rapport, the jovial banter, the piss taking out of everybody and all that sort of thing. So what you're talking about is where, what I've experienced as well is where, all of a sudden you're not in that element anymore, and you don't have that, and you've got nowhere really to turn. So what you're talking about there, where you get into bars and you're talking to these Vietnam vets, well, you might be confused about, what it is that you see similarities, but it is the hardship. It is the combat. It's the same thing, even though it might be like 20 or 30 years before. Getting shot at, getting blown up, people trying to kill you. It's the same as it was back with a sword and a spear, as it is now with a rifle and indirect fire. So your association with that, you probably thought it was a bit strange, but actually it really wasn't. It's the same thing, just a different time.
Oh yeah, looking back now, you get the experience in the years and the understanding. It is easier now, but at the time, it just felt strange. As a 21-year-old guy, it's like, he's a Vietnam vet, but why is this so easy? And I didn't have the understanding at that point, and I really struggled not with like issues or I think we all go through periods of time that were really hard, and the first year was really hard for me. And after that, it got easier, and it felt more normal. And I don't know if it's just because it was easier to focus on something else, or if it just went away. But I felt, and a lot of guys I've talked to, friends of mine that are outside now that have gone civilian, they feel it too. You just are missing something you didn't have before.
I think that's focus, though, as well.
Yeah.
So, without stereotyping again, the majority of people that leave, some of them will probably turn to alcohol because they don't think they can find anything else to fill that void.
Yeah.
So where again, talk selfishly here from a personal experience, where I started surfing, and I'm going to use the analogy because it's what I do, it's what I enjoy, it's kind of a passion of mine. Whenever I look for surf forecasts or I'm talking to my friends and stuff like that, you have that bond, but I've also have something to focus on. The same as jiu-jitsu as well. With grappling, you're grappling with another human being, and you've got something to focus on. You've got something to look forward to. Now, if again, what we're talking about, leaving the military, if you don't have something to grasp onto, mentally you're not going to have anything to focus on, and you're going to focus on the negative things and the past things as opposed to look forward to the future. So, trying to get, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but getting somebody who's been in that situation, who has that mentality where they don't really know where to turn, probably finding something for them to focus on, whether it's, I don't know, making model planes or whatever.
Right.
Giving them a focal point to focus on apart from their daily day-to-day life that they might think is mundane will probably help them a lot more than it would be then to go and, at the end of the day, let's go and crack a couple of crates of Stella or Bud or something like that, and drown your sorrows and think about the past, and you're not going to go anywhere there.
That usually starts as a good idea. It sounds like a good idea, but it's not usually the most healthy thing. Absolutely not. Having a plan would probably have been a good help to me, but I had none of that. I had no plan. I figured I'd figure it out, and clearly it didn't work, or I still wanted something else. So I didn't find the solution to that till much later in life. So it just kind of pushed it to the wayside, as many people do when they're struggling with hardship. They're like, right, let me just focus on something else. So my focus on something else was to come back in the Marine Corps, which I did in 2007. So I did about 3 years on the outside, and I came back in.
So you were a professional floater?
Yeah. I just, I'll go do something else. I'll go give that a crack again. Why not? But I came back in 2007, and the monitor, which is kind of like our branch advisor, I had to wait around for them to reconstruct and pull my sorry butt out of the archives. Calls me up and he's like, right, I've got orders for you. You got a choice. I was like, okay. He's like, I'm going to send you either to 29 Palms, which you've been to, and I'm sure you can, testimony on how great of a place that might be to live for 4 years.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Beautiful, scenic, great weather.
Nothing wrong with being dry, right?
Yeah. It's a great place to train, and it's a great place to make a good fighting unit. And I'll give 29 Palms that. It's an amazing place.
But it's a shithole.
Yeah, it's not where I wanted to be at the time. It's not where I wanted to be, especially when he told me my other option was Hawaii. So I kind of had a pause, and I'd been a civilian for 3 years, and it might have been a bit necky or a bit disrespectful at the time. I was like, was that a real question? So I'll take Hawaii if that's okay. So I ended up going to Hawaii and doing off and on between. Did one more Iraq, did one more Afghan, and did 4 years there. That's what I got introduced to surfing there. I tried it once in California, but I was probably drunk at the time. But I really got introduced to a little bit to surfing, nowhere near your level, but enough to where I can stand up on a longboard and have a bit of fun. And which my uncoordinated self is longboards where I'm staying. That's where I'm staying. That and stand up paddleboard. That's my limits. I know my left and right lateral limits. I'm staying there.
Hey man, you're a riding board, so that's all it's about, right?
Yeah, but I also find I'm a little bit prissy when it comes to the water temperature. So I haven't done it a whole lot since Hawaii. Maybe I just need to go back there. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I'll test it out.
Yeah, I wish I had that luxury. Just go back to Hawaii. It's fine.
Yeah. But I ended up there, and some people don't like it. Some people do. But I really started to understand mental health a bit more there. And do you want to get into that a bit later?
Mate, I know you've got to cut away, so what we'll do is we'll do a second part to this.
I'd love to.
Super interesting.
I feel like I've talked about everything up until the point where I want to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's weird, talking about yourself. And looking back, I can't wait to hear this because I'm probably just going to sound like an idiot. But it's crazy. It's just a chat over a cup of coffee or a horrible
Monster.
drink. Yeah, hey, I'll do the American stereotype, but there is no sugar. Let's just be honest. But I think it's good. And I think it if anybody is listening that can get past my horrible accent, or is back home and can get past yours, then I think it's important, one, because it's two essentially different cultures. As similar as we are, we're as dissimilar in the same aspects. To sit across and talk about arguably very, very similar scenarios and experiences. And I think that's what's important to unite not only our two branches, two dudes that, met and consider you, a real close friend of mine since I've been here, and absolutely helped get me through we'll get to there in one of the podcasts, one of the most interesting courses I've been on a short notice.
Yeah, I've seen some pretty weird faces coming out of it.
Oh, hey, just right now, I'm sure they're on camera.
Just in general,
yeah,
really.
just in general, it's not easy to look at. It's a good thing. It's unfortunate there is video associated with this because I do have a face made for a podcast, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I get told that a lot.
It's a good thing we're there.
Gunny Hancock, thank you very much for your time. We will do this again.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
And that's it. Thanks to Gunnery Sergeant Beau Hancock for his insights there. And if you like the podcast, please like and share, and also leave a review on your podcast provider. Thanks for listening.